Hey, what's up, entrepreneurs, and welcome back to Entrepreneur TV. This is going to be a segment that we post in our How To in the Real World series, which is going to be showing you how to from start to finish as if I was just pulling this camera literally out of the box, minus like putting it in English and all of that. I'm going to be walking you through how I set this camera up, going through all the menus, settings, and things like that, adjusting the audio, the white balance, and all of that up until it is time to live stream. So we're going to be doing this on the Canon M50. If you're ready to jump into it, let's get to it. So one of the questions that I get is, how do I set my camera up? I don't really know what I'm doing, and you're trying to get to the point that you use your camera for live streaming. Whether this is for video or for live streaming, it's applicable to both because you're just sharing the feed of what your video would be just via a live stream. So that's how this is going to run. I'm literally going to be walking through every single step. This is not going to be a quick video by any means. Any questions that you have, post those down below. But if I omit to go through a specific menu, I'm not going to be telling you what every little thing is in the menu system, but the thing is, though, I will be showing you exactly how I set my camera up specifically. So once you have your Canon M50, go ahead and attach the lens to the camera. What you're going to do is you want to take the white dot that's on the lens and the white dot that's on the camera, put those two together, line it up, you kind of feel it connect, and you want to twist, and you'll hear that lock that'll let you know it's secure. The other thing that we want to do, if you have the kit lens, it's a little button that you will see on there. You want to pull that forward and at the same time twist until we get to 15 millimeters on the lens, and that's what we're going to need for that. When it comes to the battery on the M50, you want to pull that door over and you'll hear that click, and that should pop up, and we want to insert the battery, and we'll grab one of those now. So inside the camera, you'll see that there's 3 gold pins that will match up with the 3 gold pins on the battery, and you'll see that gray little button there. You want to go ahead, gray connectors in, push that down. If you have a memory card, you can go ahead and insert a memory card. I'm just going to do it for example purposes, but I'm not going to actually leave it in. The writings and everything that you have for the card, have that facing you, and you'll feel it kind of slide in and click, and that's how you enter that in, but I don't need a memory card for this, so I'll leave it out. Close your door back up, and you're good to go. The next thing that I want to do is, usually the mode that your camera is going to be on, the dial will be specific or will vary depending on what you're using. I don't want to go through all of these things, but for what I teach on the channel, I'll usually have you in M for manual mode if you're doing any kind of photo based, anything like that. But for most of the time, it's going to be in this movie mode, so that's the dial that we want our camera in. Go ahead and flick your camera on, and we'll dive right into the first menu. So with my camera plugged in, you're not going to be able to see anything on the screen of the actual M50, so everything that you'll see, it'll be recorded in Ecamm Live, and I'll be able to show you as we're going along and so forth. So you want to go, so if you see me look off, that's why. So we're going to go ahead and click on the menu button in the bottom right of the camera, and you will see that we have all of these white menu settings. I don't use any of this stuff in this fashion. I like it to be its own regular kind of a setup that it was before, or like most Canon cameras are. So I'm gonna get rid of this, but this is to help with it being easy to know where things are. I don't like this honestly, because it just makes it more complex to figure out where stuff is, in my opinion. So I want to get rid of this, and that's what I'm going to do. Go over to display level settings, and I want to change it to standard, and that'll be that black and red menu. So you'll see some of this stuff will pop up, display brief descriptions when you select functions or settings. If you want to know what something does or get more familiar with it, I would leave this turned on. I turned my stuff off because I don't want to know and have that menu. Just makes the menu more complex trying to get through everything. So we're going to go over to the very beginning, the red camera icon. This is where any of your video settings and all that kind of stuff is going to be. And we're going to start at sub menu number 1. So real quick, we'll notice what's going on the camera screen. What is it looking like? And this is pretty much with the camera in auto. The camera is deciding all of these things. None of the stuff that I would be looking for to change for video is there. So that's not what we want. I want to just start going through all of these menus and everything that I would change and how I would change it. Now, what I like to record in is 30 frames per second, which you just round up. If you're in another country and you see like 25 frames per second instead of 24 and stuff like that, then that's why. But NTSC is what is used in America, so that's what I'm going to have it on, which is 30 frames per second, and high frame rate is going to be disabled because that will take you into where you can do 120 frames per second. I don't need that or want that. So that's what I'm going to have it on. Sound recording should not be in auto. So the camera is deciding what the audio level should be. Anytime you see auto, it's just the camera determining what that should be. I don't want that. I want to change it to manual. And then the record levels, if I want to take this, honestly, I'll start at that first level there. Ideally, what I would want for audio with a microphone connected, if I'm trying to adjust for what that should be, I want to talk the same way I am now, and as I'm talking, get my audio up to, not there where it gets in the yellow, bring it back down some more so that it's loud enough. But if I laugh like ha ha ha, which is kind of goofy, but at my loudest point of my voice, I don't want this thing to be peaking, which is it getting into the red and the yellow and orange and all this extra other stuff. So I kind of want to bring it down to just a pretty good level. So with the microphone connected, if that was the audio levels that I was seeing, that's what I want. But I really don't want to go over that 12 that's in the green. That's usually the marker that you want to go for. The wind filter and attenuator, we're going to turn those off. This is a great way to get weird sounding audio with the camera trying to decide what to do. That's what we want for the audio. Hit the menu to go back. Lens aberration correction, we're not worried about that. Remote control, not too worried about that. Scroll over to the right, it'll take us to the tab menu number 2. Exposure compensation, that can stay where it needs to be, but remember this, the way that this bar looks, this will be important once we get all of our settings dialed in. Auto light optimizer and all of this stuff, we're going to leave this stuff set up as it is for the most part. I'm not changing any of those things. White balance we will change later. Right now that AWB stands for automatic white balance or auto white balance. We'll deal with that later, but just so you know that when we're changing our white balance to a custom white balance, this third tab is where we would do that at. Picture style is where you'll be able to decide what something looks like for color. You can change this now, but it's better to do this when you can actually see what each look looks like. So we'll leave that at auto for now, but not for long. The other thing that we want to look at is the autofocus mode. There's 3 different types of modes. We want to leave it on face tracking so that we get that great Canon dual pixel autofocus and all of that. Movie servo is enabled. Focus mode goes from autofocus to manual focus. We want to leave it on autofocus. Go over to the 5th menu. Lens electronic manual focus, we'll leave this alone. The standard image stabilization settings, like if you're vlogging or whatever, are fine to auto on and then enabled for the digital IS. That's what we want. We don't really want to go into enhanced. It'll start looking weird. So, button function, we're going to leave this kind of stuff alone. Auto, slow, speeder, shutter speeder, whatever. We'll leave that stuff alone. This is if you're going to be reviewing images, this play back button area. We're not going to adjust any of these things. So let's go over to the wrench menu. The other thing that we want here when it comes to like this first tab, it says select folder. That's if you had your memory card selected. We don't need to really deal with any of that stuff. Some things, for the most part, you're going to be fine dealing with it. Anytime you do put in a new memory card, go ahead and format that card. You don't want to delete the data or the old videos off of your camera. You don't want to have to deal with that. Sometimes it doesn't convert well, and even though you can format it in your computer, you really want each camera, and each time you put in a new memory card to format it, it'll prevent you from getting errors on your memory cards moving forward. Wireless communication and GPS settings we'll leave alone. Eco mode, we want this off. We don't want the camera going into any kind of power save modes or anything like that. Scroll down to power saving. We want to make this as high as we can possibly get it to. So that's going to be 30 minutes. I want to turn powering off. We don't want to automatically have it do anything. Viewfinder, which is the little eye cup piece at the top of the camera, I'm going to disable that. And then that's all we're going to do for the power saving. Date and time, for the most part, this should be right. If it's not for you, which is not for here, I want to adjust that. Okay, scroll down to OK. English, we're good there. Scrolling to the right. If you're traveling and you go to another country and you decide that you're getting flickering in the lights, is looking really crazy, and they're using a PAL-based system, this is where you can change that. So if you're seeing 25 frames per second, as soon as you unbox your camera, you're in this PAL setting. That's not wrong. NTSC we use in the United States, so I'm going to leave that there. Each camera usually is set for the right region and stuff like that. Touch control is set to standard. Beep, I want to turn that off because it gets annoying. Sensor cleaning, I want to leave it to auto clean so that it's knocking off any little dust particles and stuff like that when you're using the camera, swapping the lenses out and things like that. HDMI resolution, I will set that to 1080p only because there are other settings in the camera like 720p that are available. I never want that to decrease, so I want to set that to 1080p so it's at least locked in. Shooting info display. When we're getting ready to live stream, this is going to be important because we need to get to a point where we can clear the stuff off of the menu. So here are some of the things that are available. You have where it basically displays exactly what it looks like. That one is fine. This one with the histogram and the leveler. If you want the leveler, you can. I don't. This is one that I will want, number 4. And then this is one that I will want, which is number 5. So I'll just leave it to 2, 4, and 5, unless you want this one so you can know if your camera is leveled or not. You can leave that there, but these are the ones that we're going to use. And then we're going to click OK. Viewfinder, info, toggle, settings. Basically, in the viewfinder, what can you see? I'm fine with leaving it as is. I don't need that. When you hear about the rule of thirds, stuff like that in video, I want to go ahead and add that grid on there so I can see when it comes to video. That's something to deal into a little bit later. I prefer to have that on. Histogram brightness, I'm not going to deal with that. This is all that we need, so let's hit menu and go back. Reverse display info, you can do that depending on if you want it to flip or what have you as far as your screen. I'll leave that set to on. And this is like if you want it to kind of shrink the video for the display. I don't like it, so the way that it already was is on display 1 is fine with me. Display settings, auto, control, or manual. So if you notice when you are first unboxing your camera, you'll put your hand up to the little eye cup piece here and it'll go dark because it's switching between the screen and the electronic viewfinder. I want to cut that out completely. It's super annoying. So I'm just going to put it to manual. I will adjust it, and then I'm going to change it to screen. I'll set a menu button later, so if I'm ever outdoors and I want to use the electronic viewfinder, I can. But for right now, I'm going to turn that off. Custom functions. This is something that will be very interesting and important to change because this is where I want to go in and make various changes when it comes to me being able to decide what a button does. So basically, and all I did was hit OK to go into this. This button up here, this M-function button at the very top of your camera, once you toggle back into the menu and you are able to scroll through the various options, I like this to be set to go ahead and change between the viewfinder and the screen so I have quick access. So I'm actually going to back out of that setting, and I want to real quick go and I just gently tap the shutter to bring it back to the main screen, and then I'm going to hit, actually, if we try to turn the dials, you'll see that movie recording. I want to change this real quick. It'll allow you to choose mode. So I want to go down to movie manual exposure instead of the automatic. I don't want to use that automatic anything. I want it to be manual, and then that'll give me options. So far we can see some of the things that we've changed, like we get the grids on the screen. We're getting some icons on the screen. We're not done yet, so let's go back into the menu. Okay, so the My Menu has been cleared. There's nothing that's on there. This is where you'll be able to set up everything that you want specifically in your actual menu. This is like your custom quick menu. The things that we're going to change the most is where we want to put that. So if you're using anything on a regular basis, it is good to add it in the My Menu so you don't have to keep jumping from one thing to the other. So we're going to go ahead and click on Add My Menu tab and click OK. Then we want to go ahead and configure this. We want to select items that we're going to register or things that we want to add to the list. So I'm just going to scroll through some of these things, and based on me being a video person, white balance is something that I would add, but I want to do custom white balance because I always want to adjust what I want it to be specifically. Picture style is not anything that I need to add here because I can change this on the main menu of the screen, which we'll get to in a bit. Let's see here. Let's keep scrolling down. I'm not changing any of the focus options or anything like that. However, when it comes to actually focusing on something versus autofocus or manual focus is like when you're doing live streaming via HDMI and you need to disable the autofocus so you don't see your face. Sometimes I need to adjust the peaking, which is the dots that you'll see, and so I want that on my menu. Movie record quality, then I do want to go ahead and add that. You can delete anything if you don't need it later on or you find out you're not using it as much. Movie servo AF, I don't need that, but sound recording I do want to add. And as you can see, anything that you are adding, it turns gray as it's already added to a My Menu, so you're not adding things twice. Shooting mode, I'll go ahead and add that. Time-lapse movies, I'll go ahead and add that. Let's go back to menu. All of the things that we can do thus far it's all full up as far as this first one. So that doesn't mean you're limited to just only this screen, but if we go over, we'll go to add a My Menu tab, and we're going to add a second one so that we have more things to add. So let's go back to configure, select items to register, and now we want to start scrolling through again to other things that we want to add. Now the difference is once you come up with a second menu tab, My Menu tab, you'll notice like we already added custom white balance. Now we're seeing again that we could add it, so you kind of want to keep top of mind what you have added already. And again, if you add anything a second time by mistake, then you can go ahead and delete it. But I want to start getting down to more video specific settings. And so the time-lapse movie mode, we can go ahead and add that if we didn't already. And if so, then we can go ahead and remove it. Probably did. Format the memory card, I think is where we probably left off before. And so we can do that, but it'll be helpful to go back and delete something and see how that works. Wireless communication setting, I can add that if I want to use the app for my phone and connect the Canon M50 more that way. I could do that. Power saving modes and things like that we aren't going to use. Let's go ahead and add the wireless communications tab. Sensor cleaning. So this is pretty much going to take us through the entire menu. Don't want to add any of these other things that I can think of, so that's pretty much it. So I'm just hitting the menu to go back. So now let's see what we have. We have time-lapse movie that's currently disabled, and then we have time-lapse movie again, also currently disabled. So if we look at the My Menu items that we have thus far, you'll see some stuff is grayed out. You have to be, if something is grayed out, you have to be in a certain mode to enable it. It can get a little confusing sometimes. But the time-lapse movie mode, we see we have this on the My Menu tab that we've created, number 1. and the second menu, number 2. We want to get rid of this second one here, but if you notice when you go over to the very last one, this tab 3, where we could add things or delete things, either it's giving us the option to delete all of the items that we just added, or just completely delete the tab to begin with, the whole menu, and we don't really want to do either. So instead of deleting all the items, instead of deleting the whole menu tab that we just created, we want to go to configure. So that way we can delete a selected item, which is this time-lapse one. So we can delete that and it's removed without having to, and I'm just hitting menu to go back, without having to completely delete the whole tab or all the items. Canon could probably do this a little bit better, but just so you know, if you have anything on any given tab that you want to get rid of, go to that tab, go to configure, and you can delete that specific item. So now we've pretty much gone through all of the menus that we're going to use on the Canon M50 thus far. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we have already. If at any time you need to start adjusting some things, as you notice, this is what a screen that I found. We kind of are at this place now. We can begin to adjust stuff for live streaming. This is a menu that I'm seeing a lot of people in, or the settings rather. It's at 125 for the shutter speed, or 125 for the shutter speed. And then we have f5.6 for the aperture. We also have the ISO set to auto, and we're not really seeing any of the items that I would want to see, and it looks kind of weird, honestly. So if I click on the menu, it'll give me some options to be able to change some things, but because it's connected via HDMI, it won't let me do some stuff. So I'm going to disconnect it, and I'll try to record the back of the camera screen for what we're going to change in the future now. Alright, so here we are with the same settings, but now we're seeing boxes around the icons so that we can actually tap and change what these are. If you remember before, we went from having it in this movie auto exposure mode into this manual movie exposure mode, or movie manual exposure mode. That's so that we can adjust the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. We can now go around this screen, and that's how I like to analyze my settings every single time, is I want to go around the screen and make sure that everything is set exactly how I want it to be. So for this case, I want to go through and make sure I am at 30 frames per second, which we already did in the menu screens earlier before. And now I want to go before, this is before you're live streaming, before you're connected via HDMI, because you're not going to be able to see the screen or touch any of that stuff. If I'm at 30 frames per second, our rule is going to be 60 frames per second, and I'll put a link for a cheat sheet for you to follow in the description. Now we want to go to not f5.6, but drop it down to as low as it can go on a kit lens, because we want to make sure it is as bright and as much light is getting to the sensor as much as possible. What happens when you zoom in, as we were seeing, you notice it didn't get darker. That's because our ISO is set to automatic, so the camera is deciding what to do. We don't want to leave it that way. We want to decide what it should do. But if you also notice, the aperture, this F number, got bigger. So that means overall the image really got darker, and there's no way to get any lower. That's a possibility. That's a factor when it comes to using lenses that don't have a faster or lower aperture. So we want to try to be as wide as you can be, but if that was the shot that you needed, and that was where it was supposed to look like, you're stuck at f5.6 or 6.3. You need to get a better lens if you want to do like an f1.8 and have super blurry background and all of that stuff. But let's go ahead and keep that zoomed out. The next thing that we want to do is go over to this auto. This is the ISO that was down here. We want to change this. Again, we don't want anything in automatic. So I'm going to touch that. And automatically, let's just see real quick what the camera is saying. The camera is basically trying to expose for this entire image and to say what should be bright, what shouldn't be bright, what should be dark, what shouldn't be, like all of that. So far, it looks pretty good. It's not anything wrong. If we partially press the shutter button, we'll see this grid come up down here, and that is our exposure meter right here. We want it to be right here. It's okay if it's a little bit, you know, closer to the 1 or something like that. If you're trying to light your face and the background is bright, like, it's okay. We'll work with that. But right now the camera is saying, hey, these are the best settings right now for everything to be as bright and as dark as it should be. And I would agree with that. So it's saying if we partially press, we'll see that we get this line in the middle, which is what we want. And we're also seeing that it's saying the ISO currently that the camera has determined is 1600. But if I put a lens up, or its lens cap that's dark in front of the camera, it's trying to expose for it. And now we'll see that that ISO has changed to 2000. So I don't want the camera constantly deciding what should or should not be in focus, or not in focus, but bright or whatever. So let's start at 100. We'll notice now that it's too dark. This is too dark for what we want, and this is not what we want to keep it set at. So we just want to be able to go up, and we could go straight to what the camera said before. If you wanted it and you said it's too bright, you can dial that down a little bit. And so it's stuck now at 1250 until we go in and change it. So right now, I'm not going to say 1600. I'm going to say 1250 is what I wanted it to be. Now the camera on this exposure meter is saying, hey, this is a little bit darker than we think it should be. It should really be right there at that notch. You should probably make some adjustments to make this image a little bit brighter. I might say, though, I like it like that. So it's up to you, depending on what you want. You don't have to go with what the camera suggests. It's your preference. But if the camera says it's 1600 for the entire image to be well lit, and we partially press, the camera is agreeing, saying, hey, this is now properly exposed. And that's okay. So 1250 is not wrong. 1600 is not wrong. At that point, it becomes preference. And so right now we want to go to the Q, because any of this other stuff, these boxes ones, we can change that, and we can select that. These other icons along the side, we can't change that yet. So what we want to do is click this Q up here, and this is our quick menu to go in and make some changes. So the first thing I want to do is get out of this picture profile style that says auto. We'll have standard, portrait, landscape, fine detail, neutral. All of these will affect the way something looks. I personally prefer faithful. You also have monochrome, and then you have some user-defined ones which you can get specific and dial in a look that you may like. I generally go to faithful, and I'll just stick with that. Go back up to the quick menu settings here. These other ones I leave alone. The other thing that we want to change now is this AWB, or the automatic white balance. The other thing that I want to change here is this white balance priority. It's an ambience priority right now, which is what I generally use, or it can go to a white priority. And you can see, like I was saying before and have said on the videos, your white balance can adjust the way a color looks. So even if we just look at what's happening on the screen, ambience priority, it just adds a little bit more of a warmer tone to it than a white priority. My personal preference on the Canon cameras, and just even in general when it comes to this kind of an option, even on Sony, I go to ambience priority, and that's just my preference. So it will give things a slightly warmer tone to it, and I am okay with that. Now, beyond that, I want to go back to my white balance setting. I don't want to keep it in a auto. I want to scroll over, and you'll have all of these different ones, and as you can see again, the white balance can adjust the color. I want to go to this two triangles and a square, so to speak, and that'll be the custom one, because I want to set what the custom white balance should be. Now, for the Canon cameras, you do need to have a memory card in the camera to be able to adjust the white balance. Unfortunately, you can't adjust the white balance and have it set without a memory card in there. So to do that for the purpose of this video, I'm gonna have to add a memory card in here. So if you're trying to live stream and you don't have a memory card in there, you need to put one in there even though you're not recording, just because the camera is not saving any memory info stuff, unfortunately. All right, so with the memory card in the camera, if we go back to this custom white balance setting, that will set it, but that won't leave it where it'll actually be a custom white balance color. So we want to go into menu, and we're at the My menu. We want to hit custom white balance. It's going to tell us we don't have a picture saved for us to be able to use as a white balance setting. So on these Canon cameras, we would have to grab our gray card. So it doesn't really matter what picture settings that you're in. I just went over to the M on the dial. I'm going to take a picture of this. And now that picture has been taken. And basically, based on the lighting that I have in my room, the Canon camera, based on that picture, will decide what the white balance should be. So I'm going to go back to movie mode. Right? And we're going to go to the menu, custom white balance. And this is the only picture that I have on this actual item. So it is saying, hey, do you want to use this picture? If you have multiple pictures, then you can decide. But if you're putting in a fresh memory card, this shouldn't be a problem. Go ahead and click set, and then it's done. So if I partially press that shutter button, we will notice now when we go to the white balance setting, it'll look different as we're scrolling through color temperatures. Now, it doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. It's just saying, hey, this is the custom white balance setting. And now we can see that that color has changed even a little bit more. So that's what we're going to use for that. Again, you have the option when it comes to these picture profiles. If you're noticing, it's like, I don't like that, it looks too muted, it looks too whatever. You can change it to whatever that you want. I wouldn't suggest auto. Standard is fine. Portrait is fine. You know, depending on what you want, I just tend to go with faithful. And then I can adjust the colors a little bit more if I want to later as I am editing. But if I go back in here, for whatever reason, this went back to ISO is auto, probably because I put the memory card in here. So we had that at 1250 before. You can see that 1250 and click OK. And those are my settings that I have here. 30 frames per second with a shutter speed of 1/60. The aperture is as low as it can go at the widest setting, which is f3.5. My ISO is set to 1250. If you don't think that that's bright enough for you, you can increase that to 1600 based on what the camera suggested. Is a little bit of a cheat sheet, if you will. But if you like, say, you know what, I think that's a little too dark or a little too bright or whatever, you can adjust it to what you want. We've gone in, we've made changes to the picture styles, we've adjusted our white balance, and we've got pretty much a little bit of a specific or dialed in look. The only thing that I'm going to change as I'm doing videos on my camera is going to be the aperture here, or the ISO, and the white balance. For the most part, if you're on a kit lens, again, as you're zooming in and out, now you can see when we zoomed in, it didn't stay bright like it did before. Now, the only thing now, so like let's say that shot with that part of the tripod and the rear wireless go is what it should be. That's like, oh man, it's too dark. The only thing I need to change now is, because this is going to stay locked, that's going to stay locked. Only thing I want to do now is adjust the ISO. Unless I can add more light to the situation, which I think is extremely well lit in this room, I'm going to change the ISO to get it a little bit better than what it should be. Now, based on the way that this lens is set up, if I needed to zoom in that much, and it literally is that dark, 2500 ISO is kind of high in my opinion. So I probably would add light to just where the tripod is to account for it being dark, or invest in a better lens. And a better lens means that I wouldn't have to be stuck at f6.3 just because I'm zoomed in, but that I would be able to go down lower, and as you can see, a lower option doesn't exist. So now we've gone from taking the camera out of the box to literally setting it up, whether you're using something like the kit lens, or maybe, you know, mimicking some settings like if you bought the Sigma 16 f1.4, you're able to get a much blurrier background, you know, lower aperture, the quality of the lens is much better. and it's sharper, so you'll be able to get better looks and higher quality video. The lens is always going to make a bigger difference most of the time than the camera would. So that is some of the things that I would change if I was using the Canon M50. If you notice that anything that I did in this video is not something that you want on your camera, you can go through and you can change it, but now you know how. So when it comes to setting up something for your camera, this can change. If you're noticing that, you know, you use something more than something else, or you're doing more, you know, photo focused or based things instead of movie and recording based things, change it. But now you should be more equipped when it comes to operating your camera and being able to use it for video. So those are some of the settings that I would change.